Greetings and salutations all of you weird and wonderful people out there, and welcome back to Pokémon Meets, the series where I see what a bit of duct tape, a splodge of glue, and a sprinkle of human imagination can do when we Cronenberg the Pokémon universe with a different franchise, to answer the age-old question of, what would that universe look like if Pokémon were in it? And for today's episode, we are taking a trip into the superhero world of My Hero Academia, to see what would happen if Izuku Midoriya's quirk, the legendary One for All, was represented through Pokémon. For those of you unaware of the quirk, One for All is the legendary ability that has been passed on through 9 generations of users to fight against the evil supervillain known as All for One. Since Izuku Midoriya became the current user of One for All, he has managed to harness the abilities of nearly every previous user in an attempt to become the greatest hero and bring peace back to the world. So with that being said, let's move on to the rules of this list. As always, I'm a stickler for the rules. So of course, like before, there will be no legendary Pokémon on this list. Even though the quirk is considered legendary by most, it would just be way too easy to give Midoriya nothing but legendaries. So, no legendaries. Secondly, I will only be giving Pokémon that represent the quirks associated with the previous users of One for All. So the Pokémon on this list will not represent Midoriya in regards of his personality or fighting style, as that's another list entirely on its own. And finally, out of the 9 users, only 6 of the previous users will have Pokémon, as Midoriya and All Might were considered quirkless before gaining the power, and, chronologically speaking, One for All's power really started at the transfer to the second user. So, I'm sorry all you Shigaraki fans, but the first user's power was the equivalent to an internet connection and an XP share item. Now with all of the technicals out of the way, allow me to officially say, I'm your host Lucario. God, I love saying that. And let's grab the Squirtle Squad, prepare to go plus ultra, and let's take a look at what if One for All was made up of Pokémon. Kicking things off the ground, let's get things started with the floating 7th user, Nana Shimura, who had the quirk of Float. Float gave Shimura the power to levitate off the ground to avoid attacks from ground-based opponents. On its own, Float isn't really an impressive ability. However, mixed with One for All's power, Float has become a vital tool in Midoriya's arsenal, allowing both users to achieve speeds making them invisible to the naked eye. When looking for a Pokémon, however, I wanted to stay away from flying-type Pokémon, because on its own, flying and levitating are 2 very different abilities. So with that being said, I focused on Pokémon with the ability of Levitate, which yielded some interesting results. I was originally going to pick Chimecho for this, as I felt the Wind Chime Pokémon suited the quirk better. However, upon reading the Pokédex entry, I soon realised this Pokémon just didn't do Shimura justice. In high winds, Chimecho cries as it hangs from a tree branch. Yeah, not really impressive if your hero is afraid of their core mechanic of flying and just screams while in midair. So Chimecho was scrapped, and I soon settled on giving the first quirk on this list to the ground dragon type, Flygon. Flygon of course has the natural ability to levitate. However, on top of that, this Pokémon has abilities that scream One for All user, such as Superpower, Supersonic, Earthquake and Boom Burst, just to name a few. This Pokémon feels like a powerhouse of a beast, and something that the teacher of All Might would have gladly used to bring some sweet justice to some evildoers. Smoking our way onto the 6th user of the quirk, N had the ability of Smokescreen. I mean, it's pretty much in the hero's name, as N in Japanese translates to smoke. The ability of Smokescreen allows the user to control the amount of smoke that is being produced in order to confuse and hide from enemies, allowing the user time to plan a coordinated strike for the right moment. Imagine like if it was a never-ending Batman smoke bomb. With that being said, when it came to finding a Pokémon, I really wanted to make sure that the Pokémon I chose had smoke as a core part of both design and feature. In short, I wanted a Pokémon who pretty much lived and breathed smoke. So no, this doesn't mean that I picked coughing or wheezing, as yes, both of these Pokémon use smoke as a main point of attack, yet the big difference here is that they're both poison types. And the smoke that is emitted from both of these Pokémon is used to poison opponents, which is very different to the use and application of N's ability. That means the Pokémon that I believe best represents this quirk is that of Torkoal. For starters, this Pokémon has the natural ability of White Smoke, which means that its stats can't be lowered by other Pokémon that engage in combat with it. Secondly, its Pokédex entry from Pokemon Ruby sums this Pokemon up perfectly. Torkoal digs through mountains in search of coal. If it finds some, it fills hollow spaces on its shell with coal and burns it. If it is attacked, this Pokemon sprouts thick black smoke to beat a retreat. On top of that, this Pokemon naturally learns the ability of Smokescreen as well. So this Pokemon is clearly worthy of N's ability, and for that reason, it takes the second position on this list. Swinging into the third position as 5th user of One for All, we have Daigoro Banjo, with the quirk of Black Whip. This ability allows the user to shoot tendrils of black energy towards their enemies, in order to incapacitate any threats that might arise. As well as being an offensive quirk, Black Whip is more like an extension of oneself, meaning it can be used for a multitude of reasons: offensive, defensive, and even travel, allowing the user to traverse terrain such as swinging through treetops or city-based buildings. This ability is mainly powered by the emotion of anger, which if not controlled properly, can lead to some extremely violent and destructive outbursts. In short, imagine if Spider-Man and Darth Vader had a very angry baby. You'd probably end up with Black Whip. As for finding a Pokemon to represent this quirk, I found it quite a challenge to try and place this into an ability for a Pokemon to use. Heck, for the longest time I was convinced this ability would be used to the Grass-type move Power Whip, as after seeing the ability used by Zarude in Secrets of the Jungle, I was pretty sure that this was a winner. Yet looking into Zarude's Pokédex entry, it felt more like an insult to use this Pokemon as Daigoro's represented Pokemon, as it states that this Pokemon is highly aggressive and many Pokemon fear it. On top of that, sadly Zarude is also a mythical Pokemon, which of course would go against my first rule of no legendary Pokemon. And secondly, due to the amount of different ways that Black Whip can be used, I felt that just assigning one move wouldn't do the justice that Black Whip really deserved. So, I scrapped that Pokemon and decided to go with the 5th generation Ghost-type Pokemon, Cofagirus. Naturally, this Pokemon has shadows for hands, which just like Black Whip, it can be used in a multitude of ways, such as using its arms to maneuver through its surroundings, just like Deku and Daigoro do. Also, this Pokemon seems to have a sense of justice, as its Pokédex entry reads, "They pretend to be elaborate coffins to teach lessons to grave robbers." It's also strongly hinted at during the Pokemon anime that Cofagirus also uses its arms to incapacitate those who get too close, before trapping them inside its coffin. Another strong case as to why I've chosen this particular Pokemon. Like I said before, to place Black Whip into a single move is pretty much impossible due to the different amount of uses this quirk has. Yet I feel that giving the 3rd spot to Cofagirus certainly does the justice that both Black Whip and Daigoro Banjo deserve. Sensing danger as our 4th user, we have Hikage Shinomori, with the ability of Danger Sense. Danger Sense pretty much does what it says on the tin, in the fact that the user of the quirk can sense danger through stabbing pains within their head. This allows the user to locate where the danger is originating from, giving the user time to correct themselves in order to avoid said attack. The only thing to note here is that the attacks Danger Sense can detect are only those that are intended to cause harm through malicious intent. This particular quirk was instrumental in helping Deku defeat the hero assassin known as Lady Nagant, with a gun for an arm and bullets for hair! Sadly, Shinomori never fought against One for All. He in fact opted to go into exile in order to train and improve the quirk for the next user. Sadly, however, he lost his life at a rather young age due to his body becoming cracked and unable to withstand the burden that One for All had placed on his body. Now, Danger Sense in the Pokemon universe doesn't exist. However, a close enough ability to this is Anticipation. A Pokemon with Anticipation will shudder upon entering battle, if an opponent has an attack that is super effective against it, or one-hit KO moves, pretty much explaining exactly how Danger Sense works as a quirk. So choosing a Pokemon for this ability, I wanted to pick a Pokemon who naturally had Anticipation, but also a Pokemon that could move fast enough to dodge the incoming attacks. Something that the 4th generation Poison Fighting type Pokemon Toxicroak embodies perfectly, as it states in its Pokédex, swaying and dodging the attacks of its foes, which is evident through its speed being the fastest Pokemon with the Anticipation ability, coming in at a decent base stat of 85. On top of all of this, Toxicroak has the downside of having the ability Dry Skin, which reduces the HP in harsh sunlight or when hit with fire attacks. In my opinion, perfectly representing the fourth user in terms of both quirk and downfall. Very little is known about the third user of One For All, yet what we do know is that the user had the ability of Fa Xin, which with repetitive movement builds up kinetic energy, allowing the user to increase both in speed and power. Coupled together with One For All, this ability can increase exponentially. So for example, if someone was using 100% of One For All and also used Fa Xin, that user could pretty much release 200% of the quirk's energy. Basically meaning total destruction just from a single stare. And you put that in the hands of a teenager, what were you thinking, All Might? Yet in my search for a Pokemon, I tried to narrow down exactly to what I felt best represented Fa Xin in terms of a Pokemon move. I mainly focused on moves that increased the Pokemon's speed and possibly attack, as those were the core fundamentals that I felt best suited Fa Xin. Throughout this process, I really jumped between two moves, that were Dragon Dance and Sword Dance, as both of these use movements in order to boost the Pokemon's speed and attack. With these moves in mind, I was stuck between three Pokemon, which were Haxorus, Lucario, or Gallade, as these three Pokemon are widely considered some of the best Pokemon in terms of attack and speed. Yet, when looking into Sword Dance, the move mainly focused on increasing the attack and not the speed, whereas Dragon Dance focused on increasing both the speed and the attack. So to me, Haxorus looked like it was going to be the overall winner. Yet, I still wasn't convinced that Dragon Dance best represented Fa Xin in terms of a move, as it's described as the user vigorously performs a mystic, powerful dance that boosts its attack and speed stats. Yes, it sounds like Fa Xin, yet Fa Xin isn't really a dance. It's repetitive movement that builds up kinetic energy, something that felt more akin to an electric-type Pokemon. Yet my search wasn't long though, for I soon found that the Pokemon that I felt best represented Fa Xin was that of the electric dark-type Pokemon, Morpeko, with its ability of Aura Wheel. Now hear me out on this one. Yes, Morpeko may not be as impressive as Haxorus, Gallade or Lucario, but in all fairness, Morpeko holds its own when it comes to speed, matching that of the fastest Pokemon out of the chosen three, Haxorus, with a base level of 97. Now when it comes to Aura Wheel as a move, its description reads as follows. Morpeko attacks and boosts its speed stat with energy stored in its cheeks. Now the animation for this attack is Morpeko running in the same spot as the wheel surrounds it before firing a powerful attack at its opponent, exactly as what Fa Xin is, repetitive movement in the same area, creating energy. Including Aura Wheel, Morpeko also can learn the ability of Agility, which again increases the Pokemon's speed by 2, meaning Morpeko can actually increase its speed by 3 and the attack of Aura Wheel can produce an attack of 110. Another reason for why I've chosen Morpeko as the intended Pokemon. Hey, this Pokemon may not look as impressive as the other three, but as a wise green master once said, size matters not. And for that reason, Morpeko is my choice for Fa Xin. Our second and final user to appear on this list is another shrouded in mystery, but what we do know is that this user had the quirk of Gear Shift. To fully explain Gear Shift would probably take an entire video just in itself. Yet in short, Gear Shift allows the user to break the first law of motion. A basic description of the first law of motion is that anything at rest will remain at rest, unless it is acted upon by an unbalanced force. An object in motion will continue with constant speed and direction unless acted on by an unbalanced force. In simpler terms, unless moved by an external force, an object will not move on its own. Yet Gear Shift allows the user to change the speed of an item or a person without the need for an external force like pushing or pulling, pretty much breaking the laws of motion. The downside when using this quirk is that due to the immense power of One For All, using Gear Shift should only be used as a last resort, as using this quirk can take a huge toll on the user and take them out of the battle completely. As it's stated by the second user, this move, once activated, will only grant the user 5 minutes worth of power before they are completely wiped out. So it's safe to say that once used, the user must beat their intended target within that 5-minute window. So when searching for a move that could be used by a Pokémon, I soon realised that there wasn't a move that actually broke the first rule of motion. So I went with breaking the second law of motion instead, which led me to the ability Gyro Ball. Gyro Ball allows the Pokémon to spin at a ridiculously fast speed, before said Pokémon attacks its intended target. Now on the outside, that doesn't really sound like anything that would break the laws of physics. It's only when we take into consideration that Gyro Ball is more powerful when the Pokémon that uses it is slower that we start to see why I've chosen this particular move. For example, if we have two Pokémon who can learn Gyro Ball and they both use the move at the same time, yet one has the speed of 150 and the other has the speed of 40, physics would usually say that the Pokémon with the speed of 150 would do more damage. Yet Gyro Ball favours the slower Pokémon at 40, allowing that Pokémon to do more damage than the other, breaking the second and third law of motion. Yet we still needed to take into account that Gear Shift should only be used as a last resort, a move that if used could take a user out of battle. So for that reason, I've also looked for Pokémon that can use the extremely powerful move of Explosion, as I wanted there to be a move that could get the job done quickly and efficiently, even if that meant taking the Pokémon out of battle. And well, with a huge 250 damage, there's nothing more deadly than a good explosion. With these two abilities, I believe that the Pokémon to best represent that of Gear Shift is that of Ferrothorn. To start with, Ferrothorn is the slowest Pokémon that can learn both Gyro Ball and Explosion, with the abysmally small speed of 20. Now even though Ferrothorn is slow in speed, it certainly makes up for it with having the Iron Barb's ability, which allows it to do damage if a Pokémon makes physical contact with it. On top of this Pokémon has the hidden ability of Anticipation, nicely linking it in to the third user of the quirk as well. Like I stated before, my main reason for this was to break the laws of physics, just like Gear Shift does as a move. It should only be used as a last resort however, but I think having Ferrothorn as that last resort certainly completes the power of One for All. And there we have it. That is my list for One for All as Pokémon. But as always, I'd like to pass the question off to you. What Pokémon would you choose for One for All? Well, why not let me know down in the comments section below. Also, why not tell me what world you'd like to see Cronenberg next with the Pokémon universe? But as always, I am terrible with outros. I shall see you all in the next Pokémon Meets video, but until next time, bye-bye.
Don't forget to go and hit subscribe, or I will get you in your sleep.